coming.
There we are.
All right. Anne, go ahead, hon. Let me
Good morning.
pause
Thank
just
you.
a minute. Let me.
Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us at the Restored Table. We are so privileged and honored to have you here. And we are really excited about this morning. We have some amazing nuggets to share with you and some amazing guests. So we have our dear friend who's been at the table with us before. You met her, Devin. And she has an awesome friend, Delia, who she is going to introduce to you. So this morning, we're going to talk about nutrition, and we're going to talk about probably a little bit maybe about blood sugar reset. But I want to invite Devin. If Devin, you want to introduce your awesome friend, our new friend at the table. So welcome, Delia. We just welcome you here. We want to hold space for you, that this is a welcome place for you. And we just welcome what you bring to the table today.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Devin Choke, and it's just such an honor and delight to be here again. And as you said, to introduce everyone to my business partner, Delia. We met in a community where all of us really are kind of birthed from the same community. Thank God that he's connected us through our mutual calling to kingdom entrepreneurship, to build God's kingdom with our businesses. And I saw that Delia was a mama leading people through a Daniel challenge. And when I heard her testimony and saw what she was doing, both of us are stay-at-home moms, and just being able to partner, to collaborate with this united mission, it was just such a joy. Because I remember so distinctly you had shared, Delia, that you were excited for what God was doing, and he was bringing people that were seeing incredible results in their health and healing journey. And then that your mom speaks Spanish, and you guys had thought about maybe translating to Spanish. And that's when I spoke up. I was like, oh my gosh, it would be so cool to partner and get this out to not only the English speaking world, but I met my husband in South America on the mission field. So I also speak Spanish, and that just led to the formation of our new venture. So Delia, you want to share a little bit about your,
All right, I think we lost her for a
Yeah,
second.
come
But
back.
thank you. She just disappeared. That's all good. The angels took her away for a little break.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Devin. Thank you, ladies, for having me here at the table. How
So good to have
fun.
you.
We get to hang out, talk about the goodness of God and just these kingdom collaborations. So as Devin was mentioning, like, God just knows exactly what we need. This is his plan. It was never my plan. I was a stay-at-home mom. I was good with that. And then all of a sudden, it's like the months prior to the pandemic, like he's like, you need to launch this business now. And I was like, okay, here we go. And it was in the form of the Daniel Challenge nutritional protocol, where my husband has a journey of, he got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes about 4 years ago, right after I had my first child. It was a surprise out of the blue. He wasn't overweight or anything like that. So it was just a shock. And, coincidentally, I had been cast on a TV show that helped me lose the mommy weight from my pregnancy. And my husband wanted to support me on that journey, and he ate the same foods that I did. And then in 6 weeks, week by week, they kept removing his 6 medications they had originally put him on. And so with that was like a huge, just crazy roller coaster of a month and a half, where all of a sudden there's a diagnosis, a life sentence, 6 medications, and then this random TV show. Like, who gets cast on a TV show the day their husband gets a random diagnosis for life. And so that just got me asking questions, because prior to that, I was just going along, like not questioning much, just assuming like everyone has their stuff together and the right authority person has the right answers. But I was like, oh, okay. No one has all the truth except for, the man upstairs. And so as we continued down this journey, and I started just looking at the science, the research of why is this happening, and why didn't like our doctors give us a heads up on this? And it's all in scriptures, right? And so what my husband had ended up doing was more of like a Daniel, what people call a Daniel fast, but I don't consider it that, because it's really, one, nowhere in scripture do they call it a fast. He just says, I ate. There's two scriptures that kind of mention this. That's Daniel 1:12, where it says, test your servants for 10 days. Let us eat nothing but fruits and vegetables and water, and see the difference in appearance of the men who just continued on the king's delicacies versus Daniel and his group that ate this specific way from the Garden of Eden, right? And so that, and then in Daniel chapter 10, it talks about he mourned for 3 days where he ate no choice food. So those are kind of like the two Daniel verses that a lot of people kind of interpret in terms of how to eat nutritionally according to this path. And so that's accidentally what my husband did. And that's what got him those miraculous results that surprised his doctors, his endocrinologist. And of course, it was placed on my heart to keep my family safe and healthy, and we leaned into it. But now this was all before a pandemic, right? And prior to this whole situation, diabetes was actually labeled by the CDC as a pandemic. Like, wow. Now understanding the power of that word, I was like, whoa, no wonder God, like this diagnosis ended up being a blessing, right? It taught us so much that we never would have gone down unless we were kind of forced into it. And so seeing these connections and seeing the timing of everything, where I got my first message in a dream, like after going on this protocol, it really gave me a clarity of mind. It strengthened my spiritual muscles. Cause if you're supporting your body, your temple of God, like that connection goes from staticky to a lot more clear, And so I got that first message in a dream where God said, start the Daniel challenge now. And that just really, the timing of it was very urgent, because it was prior to the pandemic. And now I'm like, wow, like me being obedient and starting this process of learning, because I had zero entrepreneur, I hadn't been coached by anybody. Like it was really starting fresh. And then God just connected Devin and I, where I had the experience of diabetes and had the testimony and done all the research, but I didn't have the legal label and authority as a dietitian, nutritionist, people who legally can discuss with someone who has a diagnosis. So that was something that was kind of keeping me a little held back. And then of course, Devin and I connect, and it's just so divine. I'm sure you ladies know, when you connect with that person who you guys are on a divine purpose together, and it's just like, all right, let's see what God has in store. And it's just been a wonderful growing experience. Not just we get to touch people's lives and save lives in this sense. But we're also like, I've learned so much on this journey and gotten even closer to God. Like I'm unlocking all these new levels, and it's just, the kingdom is so rewarding all around. The more you serve, the more just wonderful things that get unlocked in your own life. So it's just like, man, I can't imagine living any other life. So
can you tell us some of the, how it looked for your family? Like, how did that look for your family, changing your lifestyle, changing things? Because coming from a Western culture, we eat a certain way, we go out for our favorite brunch. What do we want? We want that hot breakfast. And there's certain aspects that my husband is type 1 diabetic, been type 1 diabetic for 42 years. So I know what that looks like. I know what that is. And, sometimes I cringe when I'm like, oh, that's maybe not the best thing for you to have those pancakes. So maybe you can tell us, what did that look like for your entire family to come on board with something that would be probably pretty radical from the typical food that someone would sit down at either breakfast or at dinner to partake of?
Yeah, great question. And so again, I'm so thankful for God. He brought this in our life right when I had my first child. She hadn't even been eating solid foods yet. Right. So I was able just from the get-go to nurture that. And even she's about to turn 5 next week. And I've gotten a lot more lenient and more where I understand the difference of like, there's like the healthy diet, which is a little bit more flexible versus like healing mode, which is what my husband was in. Right. And so my kids, they're more on just the healthy side where there's a lot more flexibility and just awareness and just being really conscious about your food. And but you're allowed, moments of enjoyment when we're at a birthday party, whatever it is. But my daughter, like even right now, I'm trying to expose them to more stuff just so in the later years, if they do choose to eat other things, I want their gut to be kind of like not so foreign. So I even try and offer her different meat and she just doesn't want it. Like it's just not appealing to her. And so it's just really, we as parents kind of put on, we train the palate of our kids. And so we give them what we think they're going to like. But there's other countries where they eat like monkey brain and it's delicious, right? So like we really train it. And so I'm glad God kind of put this in our path where it was inspired by my husband who was ready to be disciplined, right? And he was very like hardcore disciplined for like, I'd say 3 years straight. Like I was on there with him. And then as I started learning and leaning into the scriptures, with God, there's a lot of grace and just having that understanding. Because I think the key thing is really knowing a lot of people don't even understand this scripture, right? And there's books that are called the Daniel plan, but they say, go ahead and eat meat, right? And so it clearly says in like 10:2, like I ate no meat. I didn't eat the king's delicacies and meats. And so there's a lot of confusion just in the interpretation of scripture. And so when you match the scientific studies, like there's a century's worth of research that confirms whole food, plant-based diet, which is essentially the Garden of Eden, like whole food form, not processed, not like all these oils and things that kind of skew the scale of God's packaging. Like it's really, when you eat in that whole food form, there's a ton of research showing that it heals in a lot of ways, not just diabetes. And so with that, it's just people get confused with the conflicting data, like, oh, but there's research on low carb, keto, whatever that is, but it's really the long-term research. And so with my family, we try, and when we're cooking in our home, we really try and get high quality whole food groceries. But if we're out at a friend's house, we'll try and select, the fruit and vegetables that they have. But, I've gotten a lot more lenient where I'm like, oh, my kids can have that one piece of cake or cookie, whatever it is. But when we make those choices, we know we're making them, versus our society has gotten so used to those choices as being just a normal thing. I'm bored. Let me go get a cookie. Right. And so we've lost the intention behind our food choices, which then has just led to people doing stuff they don't even realize that's going on in their body. So what I do is we're very intentional and we speak life into that food for our bodies. Because the other piece is, not only do people just randomly eat it and don't control that percentage that goes into their body, they also know they probably shouldn't be doing that. And so they look at it, they think, I shouldn't be eating this right now. Oh, this is going to go to my hips. My liver is going to hate me tomorrow. Right. So they're speaking into that food, and we have so much authority in our voice, our thoughts, that it's almost a double whammy when people do that. So I caught myself as a mom early on being like, no, don't eat that. That could be bad for you. Where I was like, oh, I'm doing double, like, you know, so now I'm like, you are strong. You are this brilliant child of God. And we are celebrating today, and we are celebrating with love. So you get to enjoy this cookie for this special day. Right. And that shifts her association with food, and it just shifts the essence of the food. Like, we invite Jesus into that moment where it blesses it. Right. And your body responds differently. So that's kind of my minute kind of little cheat sheet on how I allow my family to indulge.
I think that's so important to have you're teaching the perspective around food, healthy, and joy around eating, not the guilt and all of those other things you're speaking. I also hear you saying, and probably Devin, you could speak into this, being a nutritionist, there is a difference, you said, between you're doing it for just natural health and living, or sort of medically addressing something. So when you're medically addressing, you're really focused and intentional. And then you're also just teaching a way of living with food.
Absolutely. Devin has a wonderful explanation of healthy versus healing diet. So let's hear it, sister.
Thanks. Yeah, it's it's really funny because you mentioned I'm a dietitian, I'm a nutritionist. I literally made this choice in college, not only because I was passionate about it. I'm grateful that God has given me the opportunities, and I had wonderful, supportive parents that gave me the opportunity to pursue what I was made to do. And nutrition, I was kind of stuck between engineering or nutrition. I always loved science. And it's funny because I wanted things to be black and white. I was like, oh, life would be so much easier. But I didn't understand that life was never meant to be lived out of our own understanding. It was never meant to be lived. Things are not black and white. Life is too complicated to do life well without God, right? He designed everything in his beautiful complexity because we need him, and he's a good father. We can always ask him, but how does this work? What am I supposed to do right now, right? And so as a kid in college and studying nutrition, I thought when I chose nutrition and being educated on nutrition, that I was going to be the expert. That's what they were drilling into our heads. Like, we are the definitive experts on this topic of nutrition. Well, when I was sat there as a 20-year-old hearing that our system is designed where we're not focused on prevention, we're actually going to wait until someone's lifestyle and sedentary, lack of exercise, lack of whole plant foods, which is what our digestive system, the fiber. It's interesting because we talk, everyone who thinks nutrition talks about fats, carbs, proteins, those macronutrients and the ratios, talks about maybe, are you getting your vitamins and minerals? But now the conversation must shift to fiber. Fiber is one of the most important nutrients, and the whole digestive system and the health of our gut, it has to have fiber, and not in the form of supplements. It tastes way better to eat an apple than to drink a sludgy fiber supplement, right? And so all this being said, I heard, okay, we're going to let our lifestyle destroy our kidneys. The American diet is very acidic, and diabetes is linked to chronic kidney failure. Just all of it combined destroys the filtration system because it's just a very toxic diet. And then the solution that I learned is, now that we have kidney failure, we can't eat meat. We can't eat fruits or vegetables. And that just made no sense to me. And it was then that I knew that I didn't have the answer. This was only the beginning of my journey. I was like, I've learned everything from the medical system, but the healing solution is not here. It's not here. And it set me on a course. Not only the day I graduated from college was Mother's Day weekend, and we sat around the table celebrating Mother's Day. And my mom had recently, within the last month or so, received a diagnosis of Parkinson's, and she didn't want to burden us during finals, so she waited until we celebrated my graduation. But there at the Mother's Day tables, when she gave us that news, and it, just like Delia's husband's diagnosis, it set us on a journey to seek healing versus just, medications and disease management. And with all that being said, there is a very, very distinct difference. When you are healthy, people always want to argue these Bible verses, right? Well, God said in Genesis 9 that we could eat meat. Yes, he did. He blessed it. He gave that to Noah, but that doesn't mean that it was his original design. That doesn't mean that it's his best. He also gave permission for divorce, which we know is not God's best. And so there's a very distinct difference that the Lord has shown me. When you got to know the goal, and you got to know what you're willing to commit to, right? If you are going after healing, then you want to be more restrictive in the sense of back to Eden. And you will find what I've found to be true in my life, and I know Delia has seen this as well. It's almost like in the area of diet, or going back to God's original design, back to Eden, it's almost like how Jesus is the way, right? The door is narrow, the path is narrow, but he is the only way to the Father. But once you go through that one narrow gate called whole food, plant-based eating, let's start in the example of Jesus. Jesus is the door into the kingdom. And then you get inside and you're like, oh, this is so much better. It's expansive. It's vast. I thought I needed, lots of options, but God's way is the best way. Kingdom life is the best life, as Delia was explaining. And it's very similar. We found the same thing. Once you get in, even if you do choose to be very restrictive, it can be so enjoyable. It can be so grace-filled that it literally can be a way of life. And it doesn't have to be, even though the church has kind of cornered it, boxed it into a fast, a temporary meal plan. We call it a fast, right? But it is so fulfilling, so abundant, so delightful. And then if you're healthy and you don't have a conviction to give up meat, bless you, right? It's like there's no condemnation for anyone who doesn't get on the vegan train. I don't even like that term because it's so associated. It's like its own religion, right? I don't like that. That's not the Lord. And so being the number one rule that I followed so many, I grew up in a kind of a legalistic mindset, and I followed dietary laws just almost as bad as I followed legalistic religion. And God has been setting me free. And now the number one rule I follow is ask Abba, Holy Spirit, what's the answer? What's right for me? What's right for my kids? How do I make this work with my husband not being fully committed to this lifestyle? He is the best health coach. And that's true for all areas of life. I love the verse that the Passion Translation has helped me to understand it in a whole new light. But it says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And in the Passion Translation, translated, where the Spirit is Lord, there is liberty. So when we listen to him as the Lord of our lives in our health journey, he will not fail us. We cannot fail. Healthy or healing, whichever it is, God knows. And all we have to do is listen to him.
So can you give us some tidbits if we are the mother of our, in the family, or we're the one that is the grocery shopper, and we're now in our favorite supermarket and we are on our way to get our groceries. Let's say we were going to be just trying to do healthy. What would that look like for me if my food cart choices have always been maybe to things that I would put into my mouth and I would think, hey, that probably isn't the best choice, as Delia referred to earlier. So now I'm at the front of the grocery store. Yeah. What are some of those choices that I'm going to put in for health? And then maybe we can just really quickly touch on, because I'm sure people are going, just tell me, like, what am I supposed to do? I can just sense that there are, people watching going, okay, well, then what do I buy? Because it's like, well, just tell me what to do. So if we open our carts and we have you walking alongside of us, what are you going to advise or maybe suggest that we would put in that shopping cart to be more healthy?
Sure. Such a great question. Okay. So the very first place that I would start is look at your grocery budget and your grocery bill and see how much money you're currently spending on snacks. The truth is, my family can snack on a watermelon for $5 a lot cheaper than coming back to those addictive processed foods. So that's where I would start is, I see a question here also about mamas with a budget. So I love this because the whole world, in America, our food budget is higher than anywhere in the world. And yet, in all developed, undeveloped nations, traditional diets are based on legumes, and whole grains, right? So you're thinking rice, quinoa, farro, there's a lot of international grains that are now being brought in. Those are usually going to be a little bit more expensive. Just a whole grain, that's going to fill the bellies. And then any sort of beans, any sort of legumes. These are the base of traditional diets, no matter what nation, no matter what country. I mean, yes, we know Eskimos, there are some very minor exceptions, but they don't have the longevity that scientifically research, longevity research. You're going to see grains and legumes are kind of the base, and they're the cheapest foods, right? So we're good. And then I always seek, I always seek to get a variety, like at least 10. I know a lot of big families love shopping at Costco. You can get giant bags of salad for $5. They're very simple and easy ways. And if your kids don't like a lot of vegetables, introduce them to, start with what they do like, but it's okay to eat fruit. The one thing I want to mention in the short amount of time that I have is carbs are not they're not the root of the problem. And especially if they're in a whole food form, what's causing our problems are the ultra processed foods, right, as well as because our body doesn't receive it as food. It's not truly food by God's definition. Our body views it as a toxin and a burden. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this? That's why we have the kidney problems and these things. But seek ways to trade out or upgrade away from ultra processed foods. We do silly things like the ants on a log, right? Like celery, peanut butter, and raisins, like ways to make it fun. If your kids are young, if they're not, all kids love fruit. I've never seen kids that just reject fruit for a snack. Make your snack time some kind of whole food, even if it's like a trail mix with nuts and seeds. That's going to be a more whole food option that kids are going to go for. And again, like, give yourself grace. This may be the first time you're ever receiving this information. I've been on this journey for 10 years. Wow. And it's taken me so much time, and God has been so patient with me. So please don't feel like any condemnation. Do not agree with the voice of the accuser. Do not let him come and say, you've been doing it all wrong. Your family's going to, any of that. If you're dealing with health issues, we are here. We're a resource. We want to help. We want to share the information and the wisdom God has given us. But I would just say baby steps and community are the biggest things. I mean, any whole food, right? Fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, grains, you can do meats. I know that for me, when I don't buy meat, because my husband's still, again, like I said, not fully on the Back to Eden meal plan. When I don't buy meat, I save so much money. Meat and dairy are expensive items in the grocery store. And they don't fill our bellies. They keep us coming back to the cupboard. So fill up on those those fibrous foods, and you'll start to see some big improvements.
I like the encouragement of just in your thought process, if it's so foreign to you, just take 2 items and exchange them a week or something like that, and build into it. And I also, for me personally, though it began with an intestinal cleanse, like almost 40 years ago now, an intestinal tract cleanse. I was very sick, so I went to holistic health consultants. This man actually cured his wife of MS, which is totally incurable, but he did it. And we found out the foods I could use. It worked. He twitched me with divining rods to find out those foods. And so I don't know, like, it worked divinely. It worked. And I had this entire cleanse happen for 3 months. I followed that system absolutely. And I was totally cured of, the issue of my cycle being so extremely off, and I tried everything else. So then after that period of time, I could read my body. And that's really what you want to get to be able to do, is read your body. You cannot listen to it, but when you go to the grocery store and shop, or how you're feeling after you eat something or drink something, on a consistent basis. And just like you, Delia, I was very severe and very intentional in the beginning. And then, when I had 5 children, like, money became an issue. So I couldn't eat the way I was eating. That's an issue. But I knew how to read ingredient labels. And health, they know how to eat a healthier way, but it isn't like 100%. They have a knowledge base. My internet is unstable. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
It's okay. I think we caught most of it. So Devin, am I hearing you say, for people that are just, like watching and kind of tuning in and going, oh, wow, yeah, I think I really do need to come on board with my health. Am I hearing you say, grab something that's whole food, like an orange or an apple, versus running to the refrigerator and downing that glass of apple juice or orange juice? And of course, knowing that my husband's diabetic, I know that is probably really fast sugar. That's probably not, and Delia, you probably could comment to that. That's probably not really good for our blood sugars and our whole beings, unless you are in one who has diabetes, blood sugar challenges, and you're in a low, and then of course you're obviously needing to reach for something. So I don't know, is that what I'm hearing? Grab for the orange, grab for the apple, and a glass of water at the same time, versus running and grabbing that sugary, or even if it's pure orange juice or apple juice.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. There's been a lot of, I mentioned the fiber, and it really is the package that comes from the tree or the ground, whatever it is, that whole food form. I mean, there are books. There's literally a book called Whole. I think it's written by Colin T. Campbell, and he just goes through all the research and all the science of why whole food, and it's, in natural form, the way the garden produced, the way God gives it to us from the garden, to be a blessing to our health. I mean, when I think about how far our culture is in this, just in general, from God's original design, to me, I marvel at how we're all still here. Like, that just, to me, is a testimony of how God built with such wisdom, such grace, such, like, he knew that we would get off course. He knew that we wouldn't fully rely on him, and he foresaw all the the new discoveries can be used for good or for evil. And it's just like, wow, the whole food in its whole form, how quickly, Donna, what did you say? 3 months and you had no issues. How quickly whole foods can bring our body back into alignment. It's astounding. I would say it's miraculous, but I think it's just God's wisdom. Like he has supernatural gifts of healing and miracles, but he also just has wisdom woven into all of creation. And the more we can align with that, again, we can get you resources. I have a community Facebook group that I love sharing these things. So get some support. Please don't go and just be like, like your family's not going to respond well to that. And just encourage you, like Anne said, start looking for ways to get more whole foods on your kids' plate, on your family's plate, and just be prayerful. God, show me, take my hand and lead me back to Eden, to not in a way that means I have to move out of the city or I have to start a farm. Like I do see God leading a lot of people back to gardening, which is exciting and wonderful, but I am all about finding modern ways to reconnect. So sometimes I buy veggies that are already chopped. That's perfectly amazing, right? Like we got to find the balance, and only the Spirit of God can lead us for our family and our situation and our taste preference and all of that. It's got to be a Spirit-led journey, or it's going to be miserable, just like the dieting culture is. Don't fall into that trap.
I just had to hop back on here. I've been a silent listener. I've been here the whole time. I have not left, but I am loving all of this richness. And I know that there is another one of these coming, and it's planned and it's on the calendar already, but I have so many questions and so much going on in my own mind as a mom of 4 kids. So a lot of these questions have been like, oh my goodness, my budget, and the fact that you can go to Costco and you can do this and you can do that. For our overseas people, go to the market, grab the fresh fruits and vegetables. Don't grab all the packaged stuff. Like that's what I'm hearing. But what also I'm thinking is just how what Delia said at the very beginning. I wrote it down. You said we train the palate of our children. And the truth is there, because when we first started, we all were getting on, and Devin's kids were slicing up and grabbing avocados for lunch. And I was like, my kids love avocado. All 4 of them eat avocado. We go through avocados every single day. And that is one of those first fruits that I fed them as infants. And some of them didn't like it then. One of my pickier eaters hasn't developed a like for it until now, later as a preteen, she went to it. But I have wrestlers in the house, and so they're very mindful of their diets now. And they are coming to me asking me how to eat healthy, because I've chosen to eat healthy over the last 4 years of my life. So they have seen the change, and my husband has gotten on board. And now we have 2 teenagers who are on board. And now the younger 2 are just like, oh yeah, we eat salad every night for dinner. Like, hey, can we have, this type of salad versus this type of salad? And it's like, this works.
Yeah.
And it does start with the people who buy the food. So, and I didn't change everything overnight. Like I said, this has been a 4-year journey for me, and my kids are just now coming into it. So, I just wanted to encourage, and I wanted to come back and just hop on here and be like, yes, what you're saying is true. And I eat meat. So that was I'm like, Devin, thank you for touching on that, because that's not something I feel needs to be taken out of my diet. I chose to stay off today because my tongue is swollen and I'm talking weird and I have a lot of saliva in my mouth because I have pollen allergies. And apparently there's a cross between pollen allergies and raw fruits and vegetables. Who knew? If you're allergic to certain trees, you could also be allergic to certain fruits and vegetables. So raw apples and raw carrots for me, because of my birch and my oak allergy, coincide. But I'm not going to claim that. I'm just going to pray over it as I move forward. So I'm not allergic to trees because I'm supposed to love trees and God's beauty. And so I don't claim that, but I'm learning how to deal with it. I love that you guys came on today and are just like, this is how we get to partner together in doing this. So I'll be quiet. I'll tuck my tongue back in my mouth and just wanted to thank you guys because you're speaking so much truth into just me as a mom. So
I'm there. My internet stinks today. Do you ladies do you buy juice, or is it a fruit or vegetable instead?
I personally do not buy juice for my kids. We have a juice maker. So there are times that we will drink juice, but it's fresh because all the juices that I'm aware of, we actually do have a grocery store that makes juice fresh, but still it lasts a day or two and it's just ideal. It's ideal, right? But so this is a personal choice, and this is where I'm at in my life. I would say to most mamas that I'm just grateful. My mom was so good at this. She gave us two choices growing up, like milk or water. Like I didn't grow up on juice. I have since cut out the milk and I drink plant milk. I don't do a lot of that either, but it's just, I've come to love water. I know that it might sound crazy to a lot of people out there, but again, it goes back to that palate. Like, if I've ever given my kids juice that's pasteurized, which means all those living enzymes that are in the whole fruit have been basically killed by the high heat to kill any bacteria. It's been pasteurized, and it's essentially, you might get a couple of vitamins and minerals, and you are mostly just drinking sugar. So I would encourage trying to do more of the living food, because it's going to just bring more life into our families and our bodies. But I'm not here to condemn anyone's choices. Again, I love to encourage people to seek the Lord. Like,
no,
if
we're
that's
just here for the information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to share?
So a couple things. With regards to the juices, like, it's so fun. My daughter loves making lemonade, and it's nice where you can show them the process of how to make it with water. We have filtered water, so it's higher quality of water than like what a normal store would use for a box juice, whatever that is, and sweetening it with stevia or like raw honey that we get at the farmer's market. And so they're involved in the process, and we can control the sweetness of it. Cause that's the other thing, like, you're training their palate, right? So if you buy the already pre-made stuff, they make it intentionally so that the kids will ask for more, right? And so that it becomes this kind of addictive component. And so it's a lot sweeter than we would make at home. And so ideally, when my kids do want something, I like to try and make it. And I tell them, have your water first. And if you're still thirsty, you can have some lemonade, or, we can crush up some strawberries and try and have fun with it. And that, my daughter loves being in the kitchen and making stuff. And so it gives them just something fun to do, a more involved process in the stuff they're putting into their bodies. But again, like, there's times where we're out and there's no other options. Then again, we bless that in that moment and, try and go with the thing that's less sweet so that their palate stays more on the water-based stuff than the sugar-based stuff. So, but before, I wanted to mention two things from the previous question that Devin so wonderfully answered. And, one thing I want to kind of bring up is the carb confusion and meat quality. So through, these are just two things I'm like, ding, ding. Okay, let's discuss these things. So carb confusion is something that I feel is leading to a lot of the resistance in really adopting this lifestyle, because at diagnosis, my husband is told, do not eat fruit, limit your carbs to under 15 carbs per day. Like one apple, you're done, right? You're done with your carbs. And so the idea of eating fruit abundantly is something that we've been trained to fear. Like, isn't that bizarre? The Garden of Eden, we're told to like fear it. Like, I don't know, like, it's just baffling that that's what, thankfully we didn't listen, and he ate abundantly from the garden and he was blessed for it. And so the carb confusion is coming because, especially with diabetes, which labeled a pandemic by the CDC, 1 in 3 people in America have, are affected by it. They're aware of the carbs being somewhat of an issue, but what they don't realize is carbs is not the cause of the disease, but the way the information is presented, people think it's the cause. So what's happening, the root cause of the disease is insulin resistance. There's an issue with the insulin receptors, or in type 1's case, there's the insulin resistance paired with an autoimmune response that attacks the pancreas. And so insulin resistance, the root cause is actually fat that builds up in those receptors that blocks the ability for that glucose to be received into the body. So it's really excess fat that's stored in cells that aren't supposed to store fat. So it gets fatty liver disease. That's fat that gets jammed in your liver. And same thing happens in your insulin receptors, because the way fat works in your body is your body just has to take it. It has no choice. That's why the fat is what builds up on our body, right? And so not only does it build here, it builds in organs and it builds in insulin receptors. And so when that happens to the receptors, then it causes a carb intolerance. So it's not the carbs' fault that it can't be received. It's really the insulin receptors that got blocked by the excess fat in the diet is why it can't be received. So it's like, you have a headache, you don't chop off your head. Like, that's not the issue. You have to get to the cause to fix that issue. So removing carbs is not fixing the issue. It's just leaving the root cause there and limiting you for a lifetime. So the way carbs work in the Garden of Eden is essentially, the term carb is, let me get a little sciencey on you real quick. I'll try and keep it short. It's a monosaccharide molecule. Okay, so what you just need to know from that is it's a long chain of different molecules. And the way I like to look at that is like each molecule is a letter. So a orange has a certain packet of information in that carb molecule, and your body is able to read that word with all the individual letters associated with it, right? So let's say it just spells out orange, right? Your body reads it. Oh, this is an orange. We have all the tools, all the packaging. We have the fiber that's slowing down the process to give us time to sort things out and get all the nutrients. And great. But what's happening in processed foods, it's no longer in its natural state. And what's happening is they're extracting letters from it. So it's not the complete chain of molecules. Hopefully you can hear me, my gardener's outside. So it's not the complete chain of molecules. So instead of spelling orange and having the complete instructions, it only has O, and that's it. And so your body then has to figure things out. It gets stressed. It doesn't have the extra equipment to handle things, which can trigger inflammation. And then that triggers this cascade of events. And so it's really resetting our mind around carbs is the biggest thing, because even people that kind of know this, they still like, ooh, I can't have too many carbs, but we're like, ooh, but you can if you do this certain, do it in the Garden of Eden way. So that was the main thing, is carbs, like resetting your mind on carbs, because there's intentional confusion. And we had that's kind of what God has I felt, put Devin and I on this path to just really highlight the truth. When you align everything with scripture, it's so clear, right? And so really just understanding that helps you feel more comfortable eating in abundance in that way. And if you're eating in abundance that way, you're less hungry for the other stuff. And then when it comes to the meat, the quality, I think, is the biggest thing. And so when people are saying, I can't give it up, I'm a meat eater, right? And I used to be that way, by the way, but I'm like, it's crazy when you start dabbling and seeing what happens and feeling how good you feel. You're just like, why would I just want to go back to my old ways? But the quality. So what people don't realize is a lot of animals, like, we're not controlling that source. It's been sitting on the shelf, and some animals do get injected with antibiotics. And I follow a lot of farmers markets. And one thing that I just learned is some farmers are injecting their cows with the vaccine, like different vaccines, and the current one right now, where it's like, that's a whole game changer. If you're, like, it's just, you don't know what's going into these animals. It was a little different in biblical times where you raised it, you had, it was out in nature, but now there's stuff that's a little bit unknown, and it's those unknowns that can cause those, unknowns in your body, right? So if you want to keep that in your meal plan, like, I would say just start being intentional of the quality. Don't get that one that's been sitting on the shelf, manager sale for, $2, like, that's super cheap. Yeah. Get the organic, like the higher quality, because what that's going to do is it's going to limit the amount you can spend on it too, which will limit your portioning, where it's more of a flavor and a side dish instead of the main dish, right? So those were kind of my two things that I wanted to touch on. But I feel like the carb confusion is one that I'm like, whoa,
so good,
so crazy. And confusion, that's how, the enemy likes to trick, right? And we just had an example in our blood sugar reset challenge where we had this kind of like person who was like an anomaly, like she followed our thing to the T. And I mean, that it's like usually like guaranteed result. It's just a no-brainer. The blood glucose will shift. And she's like, well, I'm measuring my blood glucose, but it's showing the same. And so we're like, this is interesting. And we couldn't really see what was happening and she had even gotten a prophetic word about the power of her words. And we just felt like her numbers are moving, but they weren't showing on the meter. And so what happened was we hopped on a call with her the following week, and she said on one of the days she felt different, and she had the symptoms of what's called hypoglycemic, when your blood sugar is too low. And so this whole time she thought her blood sugar was same or higher, slightly higher range, but she checked on her friend's meter and her blood glucose was 83, which is absolutely normal. And so it was such a learning lesson for us and for her, where it's like, there is deception, right? And we have to be able to navigate these waters and lean on God's truth through it all. So she had a meter, she hadn't calibrated it, and it was feeding her lies, and she was accepting it in that moment. But thankfully, God guided all of us to figure this thing out, and we were able to shine a light on the truth, which now is going to change her journey moving forward, right? So yeah, it's just shouting the truth from the rooftops. Here we go.
Wow, well, this has been so amazing. We are just like, we could have you back for like multiple times, because it just goes so fast, and so many questions are rolling around in my head. It's like, well, what about this and what about this? So you guys, you got to come back, and we already are so excited to announce we're going to have you back on the 11th of June. You're going to come back to the table with us, and we're going to have all our questions. And I'm sure there's going to be people that are viewing this in the live and also in the repost that are going to like, I have an amazing question. So drop your comments. Please bring them, because we really want to be able to dive in with you guys and just utilize the talents that you have. So thank you, Devin. Thank you, Delia, for coming and just sharing your honesty, sharing your journey with us. Like it's just really been it's so good. Any thoughts as we wrap up, gals? Donna?
My internet is so bad right now because it's so windy out. Kimberly just asked, where can we follow you,
Where can we follow you, Devin? And can you post in this Restored Table group? Would you bring that and drop a link for us so that we'd be able to follow you, get into the community? If we are at a tipping point where we feel like, maybe we need to take our health journey or our healing journey. Those are two really key words that you've dropped in for us today, the healing and the health. So maybe we're at that tipping point. My husband is at that tipping point right now, being a type 1 diabetic, and maybe feeling like there's some other issues coming on that he needs to address. So be great to be able to follow you guys. And so if you can drop a link in our Restored Table chat, that would be great.
Sure, sure. I also just want to mention, I have a Facebook group called The Healing Kitchen. God, I was at a healing retreat for heart healing, and the Lord I was brushing my teeth, and the Lord dropped that phrase into my heart, and I was like, oh, this is my ministry. And so the Facebook group is called The Healing Kitchen, with the dietitian. So, and I know Delia has a YouTube channel. Is it Kingdom Mompreneur? Is that where you're talking about health, or is that a different channel?
I was going to mention my Facebook page. So
Okay.
I've led to start doing Wellness Wednesdays just on my normal Facebook page, because I'm, our blood sugar reset challenge is, diabetes specific. And so I wanted to just, we're in these times where I'm like, man, like the world could use just some bonus health info to help them navigate these times, these, tricky waters of wanting to be more at peace around everything. So I'm doing Wellness Wednesdays every Wednesday with just like a 5-minute video where I just talk about one thing randomly, and to help people just start digging deeper into their health journey. And the bloodsugarresetchallenge.com is where we host our specific to the glucose, glucose biohacking and getting those numbers down. So those are my two main spaces. So it's been such a pleasure speaking with you ladies. Like, I had so much fun. So thank you for having me on. I look forward to next week too. Woohoo.
Amen. I will get those links for you. And just one last thing, the Lord just reminded me that in June, I'm going to be hosting, so we can give more details next round, but I'm actually going to be hosting a summer reset where, just an invitation to come and see. That's the cool thing. Like, just come and see, like, try it out. I've heard the most amazing testimonials, people thinking, oh, I could never, but God floods our spirits when we seek him first. He floods our spirits with the grace to do it, the fortitude, and he satisfies our spirit, soul, and body. And that's been the number one biggest comment. It's like, I thought I was going to be hungry. I thought I was going to feel deprived. I thought this was going to be miserable, but God has filled me with energy and love and light. And I'm just so satisfied. So we'll have more details on that next time.
Oh, that is so good. So we look forward to you coming back and sitting with us at the Restored Table on June the 11th. I understand that you have a birthday party next week on the 4th, Delia, for your daughter. So you can't join us then, but coming back on the 11th next week, we have actually an Olympic skier, Canadian Olympic skier, and she's going to really share with us, just when you have a dream in your heart, what does it look like to pivot and to actually make that dream come from your head, come from your heart, actually take wings, take shape. So I teased with her, actually take skis. So what does that look like instead of boots on the ground, skis on the ground? So just join us next week. And thank you again from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you so much for being with us today. And so we're going to see you all next week.